Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April 19th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council meeting. And we start our meetings with a moment of silence, so please join me for that. Please rise for the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Councillor Auger is online on the phone tonight, and it looks like we are missing Councillors Pell and Fazer. We have a proclamation for Tree City, USA. Whereas Grants Pass has been recognized as a Tree City, USA by the National Arbor Day Foundation for the 35th year, and whereas Grants Pass recognizes trees are a community resource that can cut cooling costs, moderate temperature, clean the air, create oxygen, mitigate stormwater, and enhance the beauty of our city. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, promote tourism, and are a source of joy. And whereas Arbor Month is recognized in April by the state of Oregon, and whereas April 17th, 2023 was our first in-person tree planting celebration since the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the city of Grants Pass is planting 11 new trees in our downtown corridor during Arbor Month, now therefore I, Sarah Bristol, Mayor of the City of Grants Pass, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2023 as Arbor Month in the City of Grants Pass, and urge all citizens to support efforts to care for our trees and to support the city's community forestry program. Further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the hearts and promote the well-being of present and future generations. Was there somebody here to receive this tonight? Josh? Josh, on behalf of our Parks Department. Thank you. Looks like he's not planning to speak. I didn't. Speech. All right, we'll move into the public hearing. Thanks, Josh. And I think we have a new forester. I'll make you speak. Come back up.
Good evening, Council. Josh Hopkins, Park Superintendent. Yes, we do have a new urban forester with the city. Most of the council met him during a recent workshop where we talked about tree planting soils and things along those lines for our development code. His name's James Pasley, and he did an excellent job at our Arbor Day celebration where we planted a tree at Fruitdale Park this year. Among several memorial tree donors that arrived at the park, we also had about 50 children from Fruitdale Elementary come, and they all had a great time helping fill in the holes for the trees and things like that. And then we made sure to give every kid a cookie and a little tree to take with them with the hopes of expanding our tree canopy through this more of a natural process of the kids really loving their trees and planting them in their own front yards.
Great, thank you for that impromptu speech. And we have been a Tree City USA for 35 years, and that requires us to meet certain criteria. And in addition to maintaining the things that we've done in the past, we have to show that we're continually making new efforts to plant more trees and raise awareness about that as well. All right, we'll move on to our public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant, and Ann is presenting tonight.
Good evening, Ann Ingalls, Community Development. Tonight's hearing is the first hearing for the new program year, and it's merely informational. No decision will be made tonight. It's just to apprise the council of the survey that we put out to the community for the needs and priorities that they felt were important to them. So, as specified in the city's CDBG Citizen Participation Plan, a public hearing is required before the draft annual action plan is developed and published for public comments, and that's what we're doing tonight. Of course, the relationship to council goals provides cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and community, enhances community safety, encourage economic opportunities, facilitate sustainable, manageable growth, and maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. This particular slide just explains to you that 70% of the award that we received is the minimum that has to go to the lower middle income, and 20% of that award can be for planning and admin. And regardless of the national objective, 15% maximum can be given to public services. These are the 5-year goals. They were in your packet. Exhibit A which is Exhibit A, and it's attached to your background. And this just outlines our affordable and decent housing category will be allowing for or finding affordable housing opportunities. We also have a homeless category to prevent homelessness. And then we have a non-housing community development, which is where our economic development, public infrastructure, and neighborhood blight come in. This is a summary. It's also on your, it's Exhibit B to your background. This is the summary of the survey. I opened it on February 6th, and I closed it on April 10th, and it was on the city's website. It was emailed to all the CDBG contacts, and it was posted on Facebook. This year, we received 519 responses, and all of those, with the exception of a few, were within the first couple weeks of it being posted. So I won't go into the details on here, but this is, as you're seeing Exhibit B, it lists some of the areas that the community felt were important to look at. And this is our timeline. We did the survey, of course. Tonight is a council hearing for the needs and priorities. Public comment, I will have the draft annual action plan out for public comment on the 7th of June, ending on the 7th of July. And then I will be back before you on August 2nd to review the adopted or the draft Year 4 annual action plan and request adoption of that. On 14 of August, that's the last day for submittal of the adopted plan to HUD. Then October 1 begins our program year. September 30 next year is the end of the program year. I wanted to bring to your attention some of the things that we've been doing this past year. This is the 4th year. This new year will be the 4th year of the 2020-24 5-year consolidated plan. We've not received an award amount from Congress yet, so we're not sure what our award will be for this new year. In November of 2021, we had $784,000 in prior year's funds that we had to use. And then when you add in program years 2021, 22, and that number added up to approximately $1.2 million in funds that I had to use. So in June of 2022, we reprogrammed and reallocated prior year's funds from the inactive activities, and we put them into program year 2020, 2021, and 2022 active activities so that we could use the funds. Some of the reprogram funds were used for the home bridging, Habitat for Humanity, public infrastructure for the low-income housing project they were building on Redfin and George Tweed. Funds in the amount of $295,525. They've all been drawn down for the weatherization rehab program. And then I also have $165,682, which is already funded, but the projects are not complete yet. And we also have $100,000 set aside for public facilities, which we are looking at a few things with the fire station on Park Street. And then I have approximately $50,000 left over to help with any other public improvements for housing development. With these expenditures, we are on target to reach our 1.5 ratio of unspent funds by August 2nd. I wanted to give you a couple photos. This particular house was one of our weatherization rehab program ones. And as you can see, the wall where the kitchen is, there are other photos, but I thought this showed the worst damage. And then the photo on the right shows what it looks like after it was done. One more photo, the top photo shows before, and then the bottom shows after and what it looks like. So as I said before, this public hearing does not commit funds. Projects in the 2023-2024 Year 4 Annual Action Plan are funded from CDBG funds, and we do not know the amount yet. And upon a receipt of that amount, though, then I will make the allocations for projects, activities for this new year. This just needs to be called to action, just needs to open the hearing up for any other public comments, which I would then add to the draft annual action plan. And then no other action is required tonight. It's just to let you know what the survey and what people were concerned about. And then following the public comment period, the draft annual action plan in June will be brought back to the council in early August for consideration and adoption before it's submitted to HUD. Any questions?
Thanks, Ann. For the purpose of the public hearing, could you tell us a little bit about what the public feedback was?
I have the survey put on the webpage. It doesn't have all the individual responses, but most of it was off of your, I think, Exhibit B. Most of it was that they want to, participants were asked about affordable housing, homelessness, and community development and human services. The most responses were construction of affordable rental housing, housing for persons experiencing homeless, construction of affordable for-sale housing, housing for persons with special needs, and homeownership assistance, poor condition of existing homes, and rental assistance. As for homelessness responses, these of course were 1 to 6. Permanent housing with supportive services, transitional housing, emergency shelters, severe weather shelters, medical respite housing, tiny home communities helping the homeless. And then for special needs, it was persons experiencing homelessness, persons requiring mental health services, housing for seniors and veterans, housing for persons fleeing domestic violence, and supportive housing for youth. As for community development, it was first on the list was job creation and retention. And right now we have 2 of our partners, the Boys and Girls Club, and 71.5 VOTEC, which do offer vocational training to youth. And then The next one was employment training, and right now we work with Small Business Development Center at Rogue Community College with the microenterprise activity. Startup business assistance, same with the Small Business Development Center. And then there was also commercial and industrial rehabilitation, business mentoring, and then there are other ones that are listed on the page. One of the things that I saw over and over and over again was the state of our parks and how they cannot enjoy the parks because of what is happening there. And that, to me, it was just over and over and over again. So I just, I felt I mentioned it on this Exhibit B because I know we talk about it, and I know it's there, but the rest of the community is really, they're really up in arms about why we can't do something about it. So that was a more major point that came out through the survey.
Thank you. Council, do you have other questions? Valerie?
Yeah, this is the part that always confuses me, and I just want to clarify that only 15% can be spent on public services. Is that correct? Okay.
Correct.
So public services involve, that involves things like the Boys and Girls Club and that sort of thing? So you're talking
Yes.
about services in terms of education or
Yes.
helping. So I just always like to have that clarified because, so the 85% of it, and all of it, of course, is supposed to be for low and medium income people. So I do recognize that, but the 85% of it then is supposed to be used in terms of the homeless and the housing and the blight removal. Am I correct?
Right,
Okay.
right. Because we have Boys and Girls, we have Hearts with a Mission, we have the Maslow Project, we do St. Vincent for the Mobile Food Bank. I know that we work with Welcome Home Oregon. They help the incarcerated as they come out of prison to give them shelter and, help in that counseling and things like that. And I know there's one I'm forgetting, but
Probably
yeah.
the VOTEC?
Well, the microprized enterprise, of course, is another one. But that's not really considered public service because it has a special definition in CDBG, so it's outside that 15%.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Ann. On slide 8, you mentioned that we have approximately $100,000 set aside for public facilities, and then you mentioned the Parkway Station. I don't know what the scope of that work is, but do we have the latitude to potentially switch that allocation to the Hillcrest Station as that station is in dire need of improvements?
To which station? I'm sorry.
The Hillcrest Fire Station?
Hillcrest one? I believe that the chief there has bids out right now for the park station, what they are asking for help with, but I didn't know about the other, and we can definitely, I'll put it down so that I have it here to, check back on.
Okay.
But yes, in answer to your question, we can adjust the funds. So if they need some funds, then we can figure out how to move them around.
Okay, great. And then I had one more question on the timeline here. It looks like this is going to come back to us in August.
Correct.
For an adoption hearing.
Correct.
Will we be seeing that draft plan for the first time at that meeting, or will we be seeing that plan before that meeting?
No, I will have that plan posted on the webpage. And if you like, I can also make copies and they can put in at admin there, I believe in your bucket files or whatever. I will be putting it at the front counter in our department. And then I also send it over to the library and they post it on their webpage as well. But I can definitely send you a draft of that. And I'm hoping by May that we have our award amount, because that's really dependent on what we're going to allocate for each activity.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Yeah, if you or Aaron could just even send an electronic copy, I don't need a paper copy, but just let council know when that draft's ready. Thank you.
I can do that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ann. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Dennis? State your name and let us know whether or not you live in the city, please.
My name is Dennis Dreyer.
Yep. Can you make sure your mic is on, Dennis? Thank you.
There. My name is Dennis Dreyer. I live in the county, and I hang out in the city. Thank you, Mrs. Ingles, for your presentation of these CBDG results. That's a hard word to say, CDBG. In anticipation of the fourth-year award later this year, I'm pleased to see that the respondents continue to encourage focus on projects to address not only low-income housing, but homelessness and the many factors that can cause people to lose their homes. Improving access to mental health treatment, addiction services, and job training can go a long way towards stabilizing a family and offering real hope to a person who has already become unhoused. I appreciate the work of Amber Neek, the City Housing Specialist, and the Housing Advisory Committee as they continue to seek solutions and incentives to create affordable and workforce housing. Following a rough start earlier this year, I applaud Council for recent actions to enable affordable housing and the Veterans Housing Project. Thanks, Mayor Bristol, for your leadership and courage in that difficult time. I encourage Council and staff to utilize the CDGB funds, I can't say that right, CDBG funds, to continue to work to seek creative partnerships with the nonprofit and community groups supporting the unhoused in our community. Thanks, Councilor Lovelace and Councilor King, for visiting the mobile integrated navigation team last week, a group that has been conducting person-to-person outreach and serving the unhoused for more than a year. I hope you were impressed with that. Finally, one recurring comment from the survey referred to the presence of trash and needles everywhere. Those of us who get out of our cars and enjoy the parks don't always agree with that assessment. Readers of the Daily Courier will notice that Public Safety's community response team is not exactly bashful about citing individuals who cause such troubles. Thanks for that, Chief Hensman. Please note that a new nonprofit group called Angels, led by my colleague Christine Locke, is actively working to create a program modeled on similar programs in other cities to employ members of the unhoused community to keep the parks clean and safe for everyone. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak about the block grants? All right, we'll close the public hearing. And I think we're not expected to take action tonight.
Nope.
Does anybody have any comments? Dwayne?
I'd just like to, am I on? I think there's something concerning came to me about the weatherization rehab today come up, and I talked to Aaron about it, and it's about landlords that are using this that can afford to fix their own stuff. And it was a landlord asking for $21,000 to fix a roof for many of his places, and I'm just a little concerned on the abuse of that, maybe when there's a lot of people in this city that can use it for their personal homes. So I'd like, and when you look at this, I think in October or whatever, maybe look at some changes to help out people that are more in need than landlords that are making quite a bit of money off of their rentals. So.
Anybody else? Okay. Let's move on to the next item, to consider an ordinance that would revise the Municipal Code Title 6, the Traffic Code Section 2, and Chapter 6.46.
Good evening, Council. Josh Hopkins, Park Superintendent. We're here today to discuss a municipal code change to Title 6 of the Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code Section 2, Chapter 6.46. It's specifically codes related to parks and what goes on in our parks. So this ordinance will revise Chapter, what I just said, it's a lot to say, and the Grants Pass Municipal Code. The revision will change the approval process for commercial activities and establish a new parking restriction at the Baker Park boat launch site. This is in relationship to council goals through leadership by revising municipal codes to increase our efficiency and commercial activity process, as well as to maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure needs for the community by making sure that we're designating boat parking spaces appropriately within the only place that we have a boat parking space. So on the background for the commercial activity side, Chapter 6.46 Municipal Code is what contains the park rules and restrictions. 6.4610 requires City Council to approve all commercial activities that occur at our park locations currently. At a recent council meeting, there was a discussion that occurred about potentially changing this section of code so that not everything needs to come in front of council to be approved. Essentially, you guys were approving like very low-level softball tournaments and things like that, so it's low-level, low-impact type things. And so for that, we do need to change the code itself to be able to accommodate that. And so we've prepared a revision of that for council consideration. Then for the Baker Park boat launching, this is a little new to council. We haven't brought it up before, you guys. We've been working on it for a few months now. In 2022, we had our Baker parking lot resurfaced and completely restriped. With that, it resulted in adding 13 boat parking spaces that were really designed for boat parking spaces. And there's an additional 24 passenger spaces at Baker Park. With the boat parking spaces, we do have a sign up that says, boat parking only. But what we ran into over the course of the end of last summer was when people were parking in those spaces and blocking the boating users from being able to use them, our law enforcement officers weren't really having much they could go on besides a sign that wasn't really tied to a municipal code because we didn't have one specifically for boat parking spaces. Baker Park is our only boat parking and boat launch in the city of Grants Pass, so it's really only affecting that one spot. So I worked with the former Captain Hinsman on drafting up what that would look like in a boat parking scenario. And there's a little bit extra that goes along with that. Baker Park is also supported by Marine Board grants, and a portion of that grant is tied into the number of boat parking spaces we do have at that facility. This municipal code is really just to avoid user conflicts and better serve the boating community by adopting a new section of code, and that would require council approval as well. So for the commercial activities revision, normally we'd look at this as a strike through bold thing. You'd strike through what you're changing or strike through what you're deleting and adding bold into what you're changing. In this case, we didn't need to really delete any text. We just needed to add some clarification. So for the first part of this, for the commercial activities, we're adding that instead of everything being approved by council, it's approved by city manager and or their designee. However, commercial activity is expected to have large community impact, and then there's a list of options down the line explaining what those large impacts could mean, may still come before council. So for our larger community events that come through that are going to be commercial activities, council still has the ability to weigh in on those. If we've got events where people are asking specific things, whether it's fees being waived or to have people excluded from our parks, those are like the type of large community impacts that we'd be looking at for council direction on. However, our pickleball tournaments and softball tournaments wouldn't necessarily need to come in front of council anymore. For the Baker parking lot boat launch restriction, we looked through this and basically geared it towards what we see at other jurisdictions using for our boat parking and everything like that. Essentially, the first section A just designates that, the striped oversized parking spaces that we're going to remark with new signage and things like that if we do get this code passed are designated for boat parking only. Those are vehicles that either are storing a boat trailer, vehicles that have a boat trailer attached and like, and then non-boating trailers, motor vehicles without attached boating trailers are prohibited from using those designated boat launching spaces. There are 20 plus other sites for them to be using in that parking facility as well, so we're not really blocking anyone from accessing it. It's just keeping the recreational traffic to where we want it to go and how it's supposed to flow with everything that we have down there. Then we did add a provision that does block people with boat trailers from triple parking and things like that into the non-boat parking spaces. That's something that occurs common at boat launches, and then it really just adds a lot of congestion and everything. And we added a time limit for our boat parking space for hours of operation. These are pretty standard across the board. You see the same, hour before sunrise, hour after sunset at pretty much any marina that you go to. Essentially, that's a time frame for not only safety, but we don't want people storing things overnight. Additionally, it gives our guides time to stage their vehicles one way or the other and still be out on the water before sunrise, type of a thing, so they can get where they need to go. With that, we did review all of this with the city attorney prior to his leave, and there was no issues with either code on his vision of how the enforcement would go. For cost implications, there would be some staff resources required for just updating the municipal code and the city website. Additionally, there may be some increase for code enforcement time depending on the level of voluntary compliance we'd get from our signage and the way it's posted. Call to action is at council's discretion. We do have a variety of alternatives for you. The first one is to adopt what we see in front of you as written. Next one would be to adopt the change to the municipal code without the boat park launching, if council wanted to look at this further. And then additionally, we do the same thing but in reverse, where we could adopt the boat park launching or we leave out the commercial activities. And obviously, council does have the discretion to deny change in the municipal code at this time if you so choose. For our recommended action, we recommend adopting the ordinance revising Grants Pass Municipal Code, Chapter 6, Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code, Section 2, Chapter 6.46, Parks, as prepared by staff. We do have some potential motions down there as well. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Thanks, Josh. Are there any questions? Dwayne?
So you were talking about Baker Park. Is that the bottom part of Baker Park and then that kind of the middle section with the big, large parking spots? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yes, the boat parking spaces are on the 2 levels lower at Baker Park. You've got 6 or 7 up near where the restroom is, and then another 5 or 6 down by where the boat launch itself is. And those are the long spaces.
Some of the darkness, is there not supposed to be any cars in there after dark too, in those spots too? Is that what you're saying?
No, so there are rules about our parking lots in general in our municipal code. But for this, it would be we aren't allowing people to store their boats and trailers for recreational purposes outside of those use hours. We don't want to run a situation where someone stores their boat down there for a prolonged period of time.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? Please step up and tell us your name and whether or not you live in the city limits.
Hi, my name's David Dapper. I live in the city of Grants Pass. That parking code, did you say that they're not allowed to park after 1 hour after dark and 1 hour before morning in the parks?
Hey, David, you can just make public comment, but you can't ask questions.
Okay, well, if that's a situation, I would like to know the code, and let's let Officer Hensman know that it's enforceable. Or why have a rule at all?
Is there anybody else?
I got a couple minutes yet. And how about a commercial use? How about not being allowed to hand out free needles to the junkies in the parks? That seems reasonable enough.
All right. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on these parking changes? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it over to council. Brian?
I move to adopt the ordinance revising Grants Pass Municipal Code Title 6, Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code Section 2, Chapter 6.46, Parks, and have it read by title only, first reading.
Seconded by Dwayne. Any discussion on that? No? All right, Brian, you made the motion to adopt the ordinance. How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. And Karen, could you please read that?
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass revising Grants Pass Municipal Code Title 6, Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code, Section 2, and Chapter 6.46, Parks.
Thank you. Rick?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the ordinance revising the Grants Pass Municipal Title 6, Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code, Section 2, Chapter 6.46, Parks, and have it read by title only, second reading.
Seconded by Valerie. Any discussion? Rick, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Vanessa? Motion passes 7-0.
An ordinance of the Council of the City of Grants Pass revising Grants Pass Municipal Code Title 6, Grants Pass Uniform Traffic Code, Section 2, and Chapter 6.46 Parks.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is a resolution that would authorize the city manager to approve a rate increase with Republic Services.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to make a brief introduction, and that will be followed by a presentation from Julie Jackson of Republic Services. And then we have a similar action following that from Southern Oregon Sanitation. I wanted to make a quick note. There is a Scrivener's error on page 1 of the background on this packet, and it lists the GTC, which is the CPI index, as 6.3 on the front page, but it's 6.13. It does list it correctly on page 2 as the 6.3. The reason that that is important is the action that you are considering tonight is not the approval of the GTC rate, but that the rate that is being asked for will be applied in addition to the GTC rate, which goes into effect automatically on July 1, or June 1st, excuse me. The way that the rate setting works with the franchises, we've been in front of you before, but the franchisees make a request to the solid waste agency, who reviews that request before forwarding it to the boards for their consideration. This was presented at the last solid waste agency meeting, and it was forwarded to you for your consideration by a 4-2 vote of the board. And with that, I would bring up Julie Jackson to make the presentation to you and be available to answer any questions that you have. Arrow keys, like forward and backwards.
Good evening, Council. I'm Julie Jackson. I'm Municipal Manager for Republic Services, and I have with me Kevin Planout, who's our Financial Manager, in case there are questions. I always say him numbers, me words, so if we have financial questions, we can go to him. So let's see. There we go. So I just thought I'd show you a little bit who we are in Grants Pass and Josephine County. We have about 7,705 residential customers in the city of Grants Pass and about another 4,500 in Josephine County. You can look down the list too, but primarily we have about 800 commercial customers in the city and about another 200 in the county. If you look at our transfer station numbers, you can see that last year we had 56,000 customers at the transfer station, quite a drop from 71, almost 72,000 customers in 2020. And we are not 100% sure how to attribute that number, but we have seen a significant increase in the number of customers at the transfer station in Merlin. There we go. So, as Jason said, we are here tonight to ask for an additional increase of 5.73%. The acceptable margin for our franchise, the allowable margin for our franchise is 9 to 13%, and the increase for this additional increase is really threefold. I've made this really simple tonight, so be sure and ask questions if you have deeper questions. Our largest expense is, our largest line item is disposal at Dry Creek Landfill. That rate has gone up 30% in the past 2 years, and so that's been a really significant increase for us. We understand that increase. We know that the cost of landfilling is going up constantly. Regulations are increasing, and we run a landfill up in Benton County, so we understand that completely. But just to let you know, the cost of landfilling is a pretty expensive operation, and we feel that as well. The second is really just inflation. I know I don't really have to tell you about that you have all seen what's happened in the last couple of years. With a price increase in June of 6.13%, as Jason told you, that would result in a margin of 7.3% by year-end 2023. and a 2-year average of 7.9%. That puts us well below the margin, the allowable margin of 9 to 12%. And I can tell you, and I'm going to talk about this in the next slide, based on recycling commodities, which we'll talk a little bit about, we just calculated our margin for Q1 of 2023, and it is at 1.9% currently. So I'll go to that slide and tell you the third driver really is the cost of recycling. In 2018, recycling really became quite an expensive proposition for us. Up until that point, we had actually made a little money on recycling commodities because for a material to get recycled, somebody has to want to use it. We have to get it to market. In 2018, we all heard about the China Sword Initiative. China stopped taking a lot of that material, and we had to scramble in the United States, particularly on the West Coast, to find markets for material. So just in round numbers, if we say we were making $20 a ton on recycled commodities, we shot up to paying almost $100 a ton in very round numbers during that part. And while we started to see that moderate a little bit last summer, finally, those prices are right back up where they were before. This was unanticipated. We didn't really see this coming as an industry, and so that continues to be an unknown for us, but we have not seen any moderation in that pricing. And looking at our first quarter this year, we don't expect that to moderate anytime soon. Other factors are labor costs. I think we are all aware of how difficult it is to find and hire employees right now. For us, we're looking for CDL truck drivers, which is a fairly specialized person. We can't just hire anybody off the street. We're looking for those folks who have a really safe driving record, and we're paying those people more. Now, that's not such a bad thing to pay better than a living wage, and we're happy to do that, but we are having to raise labor, having increased labor costs. We've also done things like created driver training programs because we just can't find enough CDL drivers. So now we're looking at bringing those drivers in and training them ourselves, and of course there's cost for that, but we think it's a pretty sustainable way to do that. Fuel costs, we all know what's happening with fuel costs, and fuel costs have continued to rise and remain high. They're also one of our largest expenses. This is just a rate comparison I wanted to show you because I think it's really important to point out that folks here in Grants Pass and Josephine County get a good bargain for the services they get. If you look at some of these others, and you probably can't read that, the first one is Recology in Jackson County, Recology in Ashland, Rogue in Medford, Republic Services in Albany, Republic Services in Lebanon, and then we've got SOS in Jackson County and Republic Services in Grants Pass. And you can see that both SOS and Republic Services are on the lower end of pricing, and I think, I would say everybody on this list gets a good value, but I think folks here also get a good value. The increase we're really asking for is about $1.45 per household. So when you put it in terms of just how much it's going to cost people, that's really the dollar amount we're talking about. So that's what I have for you tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can, or I can have the numbers guy do it if you have those questions for me.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions? Joel, then Val.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
So that margin you're referring to, I assume, is the profit margin?
Correct.
Okay. So that profit margin then is calculated, is that calculated using both the inflation increase and the price increase? Or is it just calculated using one?
Sure. Kevin, come up here, and I think you're talking about this slide where we talk about 7.3.
Right. Yeah. So I see two increases. I see a 6.13, and you know this better than I do, but I see...
it's the 5
yeah, and so when you look at the new operating margin of 11%, is that calculated using both increases?
Yes, the additional increase would allow us to return to the acceptable. That 11% is right in the middle of that acceptable range of 9% and 13%.
So it includes both of those rate increases?
That's
in
right,
your
in
calculation.
absence of the additional rate increase. Currently, we're at 1.9%. If we ran the entire year without any increase, we'd likely finish the year a little lower than that as inflation continues to mount throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
The 6.1 partial year would probably return us up to 4 or 5%.
Okay.
Valerie?
Yeah, I didn't hear completely, so I wanted clarification on something. You talked about there was an increase in people taking trash to the Merlin, and you were seeing a decrease in the amount of people having services. I didn't completely follow that.
No, we have an increase in the number of people who have services.
Okay.
Year over year, we've had an increase, 2020, 2021, and 2022. But we have a decrease in the number of customers who are using the Merlin transfer
Okay,
station.
so I got it backwards then. So
Yeah.
that's what I just wanted clarification on.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks for asking.
I had a question on the $1.45 per household. Is that per week or per month?
That's a per month cost. And that would be the amount on a 35-gallon cart. And it would go up a little bit for the larger carts.
What is your average monthly bill?
The 35-gallon cart is about
Appears to be just under 24.
$24 average.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for being here.
Did you-
And,
Is that it?
Oh, another question, Dwayne.
I just have a question on Republic Services revenue. Sorry. Republic Services revenue. I just did a short Google and it said your revenue went up 19.62% increase since 21 to 22. That's quite a bit, but then you want more from us, so I'm just a little concerned how your
So I
revenue's
think-
gone up 19.62 and you want more money from our citizens and us, so can you explain that to us?
So I think you're probably looking at the corporate revenue numbers when you look at that increase. And so the numbers that we use here are based on the cost of doing business and the revenue generated in Grants Pass and in Josephine County. So across the country, there is a big range of services. Probably hauling companies don't make 19% across the company. Some of the other businesses like landfills may have a higher margin, but that's a corporate margin. We really base these numbers on the cost of service and the revenue generated here in Grants Pass, because we can't really, we don't average it across the country. if
So
that
what
makes
was your
sense.
revenue gone up, your increase from 21 to 22?
Kevin?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number with me in our packet.
Okay.
The revenue here in Grants Pass, as there was no price increase in 2022, our revenue would have only increased by volume growth. So to the extent there were new businesses opened or new homes built, our revenue just increased by volume. There was no rate increase in 2022.
Okay.
Valerie?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned regulations. Can you explain to us what some of those regulations that are causing increased prices to?
At landfills?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked about that. So there are many, many things out there right now. We're looking at regulations for stormwater and leachate, which is the liquid that percolates through the landfill and then has to be collected. There are new regulations coming down the pike for air quality and air quality monitoring. I can tell you, I think you're in good hands down here. Both SOS and Republic Services are very involved at a state level with keeping up, and as is rogue disposal, with keeping up with those regulations and understanding how they'll impact our business. But I think as we, across the country, look at protecting the environment, the regulations just get stiffer and stiffer as we go along.
So basically, they're fed and state
Correct.
regulations that
correct.
are coming down
Yeah.
through that.
Any other questions?
I just have well, I don't have any more questions.
Thanks for being here. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that's it. I just appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this? Please step forward and state your name and let us know whether or not you live in the city.
Jim Ciano, Josephine County. I am curious about the fuel costs and the amount of fuel, what their annual fuel costs are, and how they purchase their fuel. Do they buy it on the spot market or from a local vendor? If we could get that information, appreciate that. And also the others consumables such as tires, brakes, et cetera, that are, you know, a garbage truck, refuge truck goes through them quite a bit probably. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else with a comment? Please step forward and state your name and let us know whether or not you live in the city.
Hi, my name is Jenny Stegmiller, and
Might want to pull the mic down a bit. There you go.
I live in the county, but I own property in the city. I understand the need for increase. Prices are going up for everything. And I understand everybody doing a good job deserves a raise, especially if they show up and they've been on the job for a while. While gas prices are going up, inflation is so high, the cost of equipment repairs. I run a small business as well, so I understand. My concern is all the illegal dumping and trash in the woods. People throwing trash in my and other commercial dumpsters gets to be overwhelming, and it's illegal. And the forest doesn't look good when we have people throwing trash in the dumpsters. And I think part of that is because of the high cost of the trash. And then when they're going to raise prices, that's not good. So I'm wondering if they're going to raise the prices. I note from friends and family across the country that other trash companies across the country offer free services once or twice a year where they will allow for bulk trash pickup once or twice a year. So I'm wondering if maybe the city manager could, let's see, how about in exchange for a raise in the rates, we negotiate for 2 free trash drop-off days per year, not just 1 cubic yard, such as they're offering in a week or so, but up to a pickup truck size. I know that there's a way that they measure that at the dump per household, 1 day in the spring and 1 day in the fall, and then also 1 toxic waste drop-off day and one paint drop-off. This might go a long way to help clean up the forest and stop illegal dumping, maybe. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak on the proposed rate increase? All right, we'll close public comment and turn it over to you, council. Valerie.
Yeah, this is hard. I mean, we know everything, like one of our speakers spoke, is going up, and we know how difficult it is. I really like that idea of negotiating and doing something and give that little give and take. I mean, part of our current franchise agreement, and I'm going to assume that the Solid Waste Committee looks over those books and, you know, takes a look, because it's between, what is it, you know, when they're going to fall below the, below 9, that's when automatically it kicks in and they can come to us. If they get over 13, then we go the other direction. So this is kind of written in code, and I'm assuming that it is monitored by the Solid Waste Committee. So when we ask the question, you know, they've looked at it before we get it, because that's a whole lot of information to get it. But I do like the idea, because I agree that part of the problem that we see, and I've had that in my own neighborhood, is people just stopping and going to the doing trash, and that just totally is a problem for neighborhoods with rats and that sort of thing. So I don't know how we can do that, or whether we can approve it with some sort of negotiation, asking for them to be willing to do some free trash pickup days and arrange that with the city manager. But I do like that idea.
Joel?
Well, Jenny, I thought that was a good idea also, having our own trash bin filled up in our business with other people's trash and then working on public land and seeing a lot of trash dumped out there. I'm not sure it comes from the city limits, but it's coming from somewhere. And then also on our private land, out Spencer Creek up by Hidden Valley High School, we get stuff dumped on us all the time. So we can deal in good faith with each other and move forward in a way that has us provide a sense of community and also pays people what they need for what they do. And then as we go forward, that's reciprocated in a likewise fashion so that we all benefit. So thank you, Jenny.
Brian, then Rick.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, Jason, with what Councilor Lovelace said regarding the Solid Waste Agency reviewing this. What level of depth do they look at the actual budgets before they make a approval?
Yeah, so we looked in pretty in-depth detail. I'd actually asked that Councilor Riker speak to this. He is the member on the board of the agency. They bring in more in-depth financials than you saw today from Republic Services. We look at where the expenses are, where their cost centers are, what they're spending on their capital. They have a whole formula that's laid out in the franchise agreements, which is the allowable expenses, which are removed and are counted towards that profitability. And so we do take a pretty in-depth look at that on a year-over-year basis.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
I will be in support of this. Unfortunately, the cost of everything goes up today, and I thought that Julie did an excellent presentation on just showing the factors that go into this. And when they brought it before the Solid Waste Committee, we did not approve it instantly. We had them come back with additional facts for a second time, so we felt we better understood the challenges they face. But the other aspect of this, that we do have a franchise agreement that guarantees them a certain amount of profit so they can operate. And I would hate to see our city not have garbage collection. Thank you.
Joel?
So I also assume that that profit is determined by an audit, correct? An independent auditor, or is that, how is that determined?
Please step up to this mic here in the middle and make sure that it's on. There should be a light at the base.
Thank you. On? Thank you. As a publicly traded company, our financial statements are audited at the highest level. Each individual division rolls up to the corporate financial statements. We're audited through internal and external auditors throughout the year. So each individual division that we operate is subject to audit.
The financial agreement that we hold also with them does provide the city council to, upon request, do an audit.
Additional discussion? Anybody want to make a motion? Valerie?
Yes, I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the proposed rate sheet, Exhibit A from Republic Services, and encourage Republic and the city manager to try to come together with some sort of free pickup day to help encourage the community to dispose of their trash. Can't do that? Okay.
You can make whatever motion you want.
Okay, good. You were just nodding at somebody over there, and I thought, oh, am I doing something wrong? Anyway, so that's my motion.
All right, are you seconding, Rick?
I have a question on the motion. I feel the focus here is on a rate increase and so forth, not on the policy and programs. And I don't know if I'm comfortable with adding that in. They already have different days and times in the year where they do different programs.
Let's see if the motion gets a second before we have discussion. Does anybody want to second the motion? Okay, Rick seconded the motion. Now you can discuss.
So they already have programs during the year that address a lot of that, and I feel that would be a separate discussion. But Aaron, you had?
Yeah, I would concur with Council Riker. I think at this point it council may want to have additional conversations with regards to free days. I'm very familiar with solid waste free days in other communities, and they've had a lot of negative experiences with that, because when the public knows that there's going to be a free day for April 22nd, Earth Day, or whatever it is, people will start storing their things. They'll start piling their garbage up, and it could be months as it's piling up. And so you will have communities that have the free days that you'll start to see, whether it's piles of garbage, washers and dryers, whatever it is, waiting for that free day to happen. So there is there's a pros and cons for that, and I think it might be something the council may want to consider after some further discussion on that.
Joel?
Well, the other thing I'm thinking is my wife told me there's a free day coming up and I needed to clean my garage. Is that true? We have a free day coming up and I need to clean my garage. Yeah, I do. Okay.
That was part of the motion, I think.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the motion is that we would approve the resolution authorizing the increased rate, as well as asking the city manager to have further discussion with Republic about free days or increased services. Any further discussion on that? All right, Valerie, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Dwayne?
No.
Joel?
So if I understand the motion, it is dependent upon future negotiations, is that correct, or not?
I think the rate increase would not be dependent. It's just a also do this.
It wasn't encouraged, it wasn't
It would be encouraged as we have the free day coming up.
It would be to have a discussion about whether or not that was a possibility, but the
Okay.
rate increase would be approved.
So what I'm voting for is the rate increase and decoupling that from the other, so.
Okay, they're attached, well, they're,
In this motion, they're attached.
they're attached, but the rate increase is not dependent on anything happening with the subsequent discussion.
Okay, so, okay, so it looks like I can support it. We get the rate increase and then we have a discussion on free days. But that's not predetermined by our motion.
Right.
Okay, I'll go ahead and vote yes.
Rick?
I will also vote yes because it's not, the rate increase is not contingent upon the addition in the motion. Thank you.
Right. Rob?
No.
Brian?
No.
Vanessa?
No.
All right, motion failed 4-3. Somebody else like to make a motion? Rick?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the approved rate sheet Exhibit A from Republic Services.
Seconded by Valerie. Discussion on the motion? All right, Rick, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
No.
Brian?
No.
Valerie?
Yes.
Dwayne?
No.
Joel?
Yes?
Vanessa?
No.
Okay, motion failed again, 4-3. Joel?
So I make a motion to have an audit, an independent audit as we can require under our contract to see what the results of that audit are, and then that we use that audit to abide by our contract.
Seconded by Rick. Question, seconded. Is somebody seconding the motion? Valerie seconded the motion. You have discussion? Rick, go ahead.
The Solid Waste Committee had briefly a discussion whether we would have an audit or not, and it was mentioned an audit would take 3 to 6 months. And it's already been shown in the testimony presented here that Republic is operating below the 9% now, and all that does is compound if you start, this is just my impression, if you hold off on a decision of their ability to raise the rates, then the rate would have to be increased probably, given today's environment, even higher in the future. And I think that makes it harder on the ratepayer. So I like to see gradual rate increases rather than large rate increases. So I would be against having a separate audit that would delay this from moving forward. Thank you.
Further discussion? Brian?
Yeah, I don't know that I'm in favor of this motion either. I think if it does fail, I would probably propose an approval at a lesser rate.
Any other discussion? Rick?
Jason, I know that the parameter for profit is 9 to 13%, and I don't want to mix because we have two presentations here. It's my understanding one of the presentation is still below the 9%.
That is correct.
So even though the agencies are coming for and asking for a rate increase, it's also, isn't there a 2-year window also that they have to average it?
All of these are looking at a 2-year window. If you remember on one of the previous slides, they were looking at last year and this year pro rata, and that's the one that would bring them under.
So with that viewpoint, there's always, you're having to play catch up because it is a 2-year average. In the contract with the franchise agreement, they are allowed to go to 9%. So that's why I would be in favor of having this move forward. Thank you.
Rob?
I don't know, Jason, maybe you'll be able to answer this question. So if they fall below 9% and the council turns them down, don't they automatically get the raise anyway after a certain period of time?
No, there is another provision, but I believe, I don't know the exact provision, they have to drop, I want to say maybe to 5%, and then they can come to the city manager and they have to raise them up to the minimum of the 9%. But it has to be lower, much lower than 9% to do the automatic trigger.
Thank you.
Brian?
In the presentation, it said that this increase is going to increase their margin to approximately 11%, which is 2% above the minimum. So I would propose that we essentially lower the request by 2%, which would still put them within operating margin if this motion fails.
All right, so the motion on the table right now would be to require an audit and delay any action on the increase until we do that. Ready to vote? Joel, you made the motion. How do you vote?
I'll vote yes, I made the motion.
Rick?
No?
Rob?
No.
Brian?
No.
Valerie?
I'll actually go with a no as well.
Dwayne?
No.
And Vanessa?
No.
All right, no, 6-1. Brian?
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the rate sheet with the modification of the rate increase of 5.73% be decreased so that the total increase essentially, well, it's getting messy, but basically a 2% decrease in the overall increase. And I don't think that we have the ability to change the GTC increase. So that would be the 5.73 going to a 3.73% increase. Do you want me to say that more succinctly?
Well, I just want to clarify that your goal is to bring it to a 9% margin.
Well, the current increase total is 11.86%, which takes them to an 11. So yes, the goal is to get them to the 9% so that they are within margin.
Okay.
I might need some help with the math on that.
Yeah,
Or that can just be the motion.
I think that is more clear than specifying a 2% decrease.
Okay, then I'll do that.
Okay, so the motion would be to authorize a rate increase that would bring them to a 9% margin. Dwayne is seconding. Discussion on that. Valerie?
Yeah, my question is, so does that mean that, because this is a 2-year, right, contract basically, or no?
The contract is essentially, the franchise agreements are essentially perpetual.
Okay.
Were you to cancel today, it would extend for another 7 years.
Okay.
So if their profitability is down next year, they may be back in front of you next year with another
Okay.
request,
Okay, that
depending on
answers-
what CPI does to hold
Okay.
them even.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Any further discussion? Rick?
I will not be supporting the motion because I feel you're looking at the 2-year average. We don't see them coming back very often to stay within the 9 to 13%. So I feel it's extra time to reduce it to just a minimum 9%. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, Brian, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
This is a hard one because I kind of feel like Rick does, but at the same time, they need something, so I'll say yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
No.
Rick?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-2. Any further discussion on this one? All right, and we have a very similar request now coming up from SOS.
We do. Thank you, Mayor. And we have a very similar request. I did want to note the same Scrivener's error on the front page where the GTC was listed at 6.3. On the back page, it is listed correctly at 6.13. And with that, I'm going to hand off to Mr. Nick Fahey and Trent Carpenter from SOS for a discussion about Southern Oregon Sanitation rate request.
Thank you, Jason and Julie, for clearing that minefield for me. My name is Nick Fahey. I'm the Government Affairs Director for Southern Oregon Sanitation. I have Trent Carpenter, our General Manager, here for any more technical questions than I feel I'm comfortable to answer. We're really going to go over two things today, who is SOS and the rate increase. We are a 75-year-old, third-generation, family-owned, locally owned garbage company. As of last year, we are the last locally owned garbage company in Southern Oregon. I feel sorry for that company, but we are very happy to announce that we are family-owned still. We do service 3 different counties, about 28,000 customers. So Jason and Julie kind of covered this stuff already. So when we go to have a rate increase, we hand in our annual report. They then look at the garbage and trash index. All those things look good. So we automatically, as long as we fall into the certain parameters, we are able to have that increase. We are asking for more than that, though. So we were fortunate we got a 6-0 approval for our rate increase. Ours is a compounded increase of 12%. That's that 6.13 and that 5.54% compound those, it's 12%. So 44% of our customers, a total increase, it's 274 with both of those. What you're really talking about is about $1.50. This will get us close to the operating margin, but it still will keep us below that. Over the last couple of years, these are our service incomes and major expenses. Truck expenses, the question was asked earlier, that is fuel, that's brakes, that's tires, that's oil changes, everything you're going to need for a truck. That is going up fairly high. Just in the last 2 years, it's gone up 109%. Disposal, very similar to what Julie said in the last 2 years, it's gone up 24%. Compensation, that's not our employees getting a 51% increase. That is additional headcount. That is FTEs that we are required to have because we're just a growing company. And then recycling, and Julie stepped on it. We see more expense in recycling than it does to get rid of it as garbage. We did have a 1% increase in residential customer counts, but we also saw a 4% increase in recycling counts and 2.5% increase in yard debris. That means that our customers are adopting to these included services faster than we're growing actual customers. These are the customers that didn't have that service before, deciding that they want to cut their bill by adding these services. That's great for the environment, that's great for our community, but it does mean that our expenses in these areas are going up faster than we are taking in income for them. I've showed this slide to you a couple of years ago, but it's important to reiterate. The service level in Grants Pass is more than the city of Portland, more than the city of Medford, more than the city of Ashland. The customers in Grants Pass get touched 134 times a year, as opposed to our next closest municipality with garbage, recycle, yard waste at 104. That's a 29% increase in services that you are receiving. And just like Julie said in her presentation, we are on the far left here. That is our proposed rate of $25.55 for that small container. And then there's Ashland, Medford, and even Crescent City. You are going to be receiving this more service for $7 and $8 less than those other municipalities. That's pretty good value. Operating margin for 2022. The city of Grants Pass, 1.9%. That's very similar to what Julie said. Our 2-year average at 4% and our 6-year average at 5.6%. We are consistently below that minimum of 9%. We are consistently below the 8%, which we are allowed to come in and to ask for a rate increase, and we are consistently very near that 5%, which is an emergency rate that we can go to Aaron and say we actually do need a rate increase. For 2023, if we have this rate increase, this 12% increase for the full year, we'll be at 7%. Because it's effective mid-year, it's only half the year, we're going to have a 3.6% operating margin for 2023. Thank you very much. I'm here for recycling garbage questions. I did want to touch on a few things. One, we do have our free yard waste, our free garbage service this weekend at our transfer stations. The household hazardous waste event is going to be in a month or two right after road disposal in White City, and paint is taken care of by Paint Care. And that is, you need to take that paint to an actual paint store. That's not received at the household hazardous waste event. Do you have anything?
Just want to thank the council. I'm Trent Carpenter, General Manager for Southern Oregon Sanitation. As Aaron alluded to, Mr. Kubik, when you keep saying a free day, it's not a free day. It's for the people that are coming in, they're not having to pay anything. That means everyone else is paying for that. So it is truly subsidized. We have that event. It's a worthwhile event. We don't have that in any other jurisdiction. We have it here. We've had it here for a very long time. Worth doing, but you do want to be careful about if you have multiple ones of those, you will see people deciding that they don't want to pay a garbage bill and they don't want to go to a transfer station, they're going to put it in their garage or out on the street and wait for, hey, we have these every 3 months. I'm not going to pay my bill, but the rates would have to go up to subsidize that event. So something to consider, absolutely worth talking about. Again, the HHW event, as Nick alluded to, something we started doing a few years back here in Josephine County. It costs roughly about $90,000 every time we have that event. Again, that's not a free event. While the customers or the people that are coming in don't have to pay anything, it is subsidized by the rates. And at that point, we'll just take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Questions? Joel?
So the state of Oregon imposed a business tax on the gross a couple years ago, and I think it was 1% of a total gross. Are you guys subject to that tax? And that's an increase in your operating costs, and that goes directly to the state of Oregon.
Yeah, you're referring to the CAT tax, and that is a gross sales receipt tax. We are subject to that, and we do pay that, and it's very similar to like a franchise fee. It comes off the very top before we get to do anything else.
And so then who pays for that? You?
That, like the franchise fees and everything else we pay, is the ratepayers.
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Valerie?
Yeah, in talking about the same thing, with the family leave, are you expecting that also? Because when does that start? Is that a July? When is that coming around?
Yeah, currently that is coming around. It becomes effective in September when employees can start actually taking that family leave and be paid. Our corporation has looked at it, and we figure we will have to add for our entire company probably 3 full-time equivalents to the amount of people that will be utilizing that Family Leave Act.
Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to add, because it was asked a number of different times and talked about for an audit, we are actually reviewed by Moss Adams, an outside agency, because we do business in a number of different jurisdictions. That is one of our requirements, so we have them completely go through our financials. We are doing rate increases in every one of our jurisdictions, and just actually had Jackson County staff in our office for about 2 hours doing similar to what the solid waste agency did. Had no issues, understood where the expenses were coming from. So again, Grants Pass gets a really good service from both companies. It is you're paying less in the city of Grants Pass than the people that own the landfill in Medford. So more service, less expensive. We're trying to do a really good job. If the question is why are we not asking for more, our family lives here. We understand the economics of Josephine County, the city of Grants Pass. We consciously make a decision trying not to ask for any more than we have to be able to operate.
Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? No? Okay. We'll close public comment and turn it back over to you, Council. Rick?
I'd like to make a motion to move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to approve the proposed rate increase for Southern Oregon Sanitation.
Seconded by Joel. Discussion? No? Okay. Rick, you made the motion to authorize. How do you vote?
Yes.
Rob?
No.
Brian?
No.
Valerie?
Yes.
Dwayne?
No.
Joel?
Yes?
Vanessa? No. That was a no. Motion fails, 4-3. Brian?
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to approve a rate increase with Southern Oregon Sanitation that totals 10%, down from 11.67%.
Is there a second? Motion, is that a second? Seconded by Rob and Vanessa. Any discussion? Rick?
So Brian, they just indicated they'll be asking for less than the minimum 9%. but you want them to be lower than that, even though the franchise agreement allows that.
Well, I just know that the motion failed and we need to do another motion, so that's what I did.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Joel?
Well, I just think both of these services provide a very important service, and I remember when the garbage men in New York City, which was a municipal event at the time, went on strike for more money, and it was an extended disagreement, and for the cost of $2 a month, it was horrible. And this is an essential service, and like it or not, we need to pay for it. So I can understand people wanting to do what they think is popular by squabbling over $2 a month for an essential service. But I don't support that, because I support a clean city. And I want to support the local businesses, even in this environment that I think the state has made some bad decisions for our businesses that have increased operating costs also. So I'll be voting no. It doesn't mean I'm against the essential service. I am for the essential service, but I think we need to pay for it, and they need to make a fair living.
Valerie?
Yeah, I'm going to vote no, and I even feel bad about my last yes vote, because I do support this service. I think it's important. I know that regulations coming from up north is what is killing us, but we don't have any control over that. And like you said, it's an essential service. There, we have an agreement with them. It would be great if we had all sorts of garbage services, that we had a lot of competition we can choose from, but that's not how this sort of service works. So I'm also going to vote no on this, because I believe that we need to give them, I expect them to be back next year. Let's put it that way. That's just a reality. So with just one more thing to have to pick up next year that we could have taken care of tonight.
Brian, then Rick?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Joel. I don't appreciate the insinuation that this motion is against a clean city. I am in favor of a clean city as well.
Rick?
I'm concerned that I feel the presentation and the request is reasonable, and if we postpone a rate increase as requested, that it just puts greater pressure in the future to raise the rates even further, or when they're operating close to the, I want to say break-even point isn't the right terminology, but the lower end of the spectrum, it does not encourage one to be efficient, because then all of a sudden, if you really need that rate increase, then you can be inefficient and make all your figures go sideways so that you can get the rate increase. And I think that is difficult, and it's the wrong perspective. So I will be voting against the motion.
Rob?
So if I understand this correctly, the increase that we voted on a few minutes ago for the other company, and this one is still sufficient for them to operate in the black. It's still sufficient for them to make a profit, and it's still sufficient for them to make a profit while the city is clean. So I really don't understand why anyone's wringing their hands over it if it's within the operating range of what it takes for them to cover their expenses and make a profit. So to me, it's a reasonable motion, as was the one for Republic.
Brian?
Well, just to clarify, Rob, the proposed increase will only bring their profitability to 7.5%, which is still outside of the range of 9 to 13%.
Further discussion? All right, I think the motion was to authorize an increase, a 10% rate increase. Okay, not to bring it into a 10% margin. Okay, so the motion is to authorize a 10% rate increase, and Brian, you made that motion? How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
No.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
No.
Rick?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-3. Anything further on this? Okay. That will take us to our next item, which is to consider a resolution that would establish the Sustainable Tourism Grant Program.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, and members of the public. I'm Dana Pierce with Economic Development Manager here. Thank you for the opportunity to bring this back to you, the Sustainable Tourism Grant. I think it's a great opportunity for us to establish a grant program to help businesses and nonprofits promote tourism in Grants Pass through a variety of promotional activities. It does relate to our council goals through encouraging economic opportunities by designating a portion of the transient lodging tax to fund projects and promotions. I just wanted to note that changes that we made in this document are going to be in bold throughout the presentation. I also wanted to note that in your Exhibit 1, it does show the changes on a Word document, which looks different than the final application design, because that program doesn't allow for the track changes, so that's why they look different. This all started back in October at a council workshop that the Tourism Advisory Committee was making a recommendation to use surplus transient lodging tax monies to create a grant program to support tourism promotion for Grants Pass. And those funds, they must be used according to the ORS 320350 and the Municipal Code 4.05.240. In that, 40% of funds are designated for tourism promotion, and as you know, 28% goes to our Visit Grants Pass destination management organization. But the remaining tourism funds, they could be eligible to be allocated for this grant program. Following that, we presented on March 15th an initial draft of the Sustainable Tourism Grant to the City Council. Recommendations and modifications were discussed and revisions were incorporated into the application. Then on April 4th, those councilor recommendations and revisions were presented and discussed at the Tourism Advisory Committee meeting. Additionally, the feedback from that committee has been also incorporated. Some of those recommendations were to have a spring and fall deadline. They also agreed that the council should be the final approving body, and they did request to have a representative from the DMO be added to the review committee. As far as eligibility criteria, it was of interest to the council to add businesses to that, so we did do that. Registered businesses and nonprofits are eligible as well. Some of the same criteria that remains is that those businesses must be within the urban growth boundary of the city, and the grant expenses must be transient lodging tax eligible. As far as the review and funding process, we did retain the minimum $2,500 request and a maximum $10,000 request. We also did retain the no match requirement. Some of the reasons behind that, the grant match is often required for purchases of large capital assets or infrastructure for a business, which is how our current economic development programs are structured. But under this program, capital purchases, infrastructure, and even tourism facilities are not eligible. So for that reason, this program is focusing on paying direct funds to promote activities to attract tourists. by infusing businesses and nonprofits with these funds, we expect they will have the ability and extent to expand their promotional activities and hopefully have create a public benefit. We also feel, excuse me, sorry, I have to move this, that could also bolster those businesses if they can take some of those funds that they would use for their event and put it on other things and rely on some funding for advertising through the grant. That could help bolster those events. Also, regarding the no match, the research we did on other Oregon cities with similar tourism promotion programs, they did not require a match. So because of that, we stuck with that precedent. Regarding the annual timeline and review process, at the March 15th meeting, council seemed to have some mixed feelings about whether or not to go with a grant cycle deadline or to open it up for the year, so an open season style application process. After discussions with the Tourism Advisory Committee as well as further research, we really did find that there were more pros to having a deadline than to having the open season concept. Some of the reasons were that this competitive process would allow the review committee and the council to use a ranking process to ensure funds are awarded to projects with the most significant community impact. Also, as noted before, it does differ from our other economic development grant programs. In those, the businesses make the request directly to us on timeframes that are specific to their project, as well as the bounds for those projects are pretty specific, like the Central Business District, for example. In this program, it would be open to all businesses in the urban growth boundary, and so we expect there to be a higher number of applicants. Also, the Tourism Advisory Committee, they strongly supported the deadline. They view it as a necessity for predictability, efficiency, and ease of process. And they were taking into consideration the time of the applicant, staff, the review committee, and the counselors as well. They also believe it would lead to better planning and a higher quality applicant. The Tourism Advisory Committee is in favor of having the spring and fall cycle. They believe this is better to support tourism in the off-season and also will maximize the use of the allocated funds. So that brings me to the fall and spring cycle deadline. We did incorporate that into the application. We felt like this was a good compromise between the annual cycle and an open season model. In this case, the application itself would open March and September and then close in mid-April and mid-October, but for this initial cycle, we are hoping it could begin immediately. Sorry about that, I scrolled too far. Apologies. The next piece here is about the review committee makeup. The Tourism Advisory Committee wanted to add a DMO representative to the review committee. And I apologize, this part is. I have a lot of notes, so I have to scroll down. So we did add the DMO as part of the review committee, but we eliminated the full TAC review to kind of ease that process. And so that would make the new review process go to staff to determine eligibility, then have the review committee do the scoring and bringing the final results of that to the council for approval. I do want to note that the DMO did agree to be part of the committee, and they also said that they could offer some additional consultation to the awardees in order to maximize the cross-promotion that they could do and also ensure effective use of the funds. We also have the grant reporting and performance measures. This came up at the March 15th meeting. We did soften the language in that portion of the application. And we, I guess, removed the language regarding disqualification for future grant application eligibility if the grant completion report is not submitted. However, we did still keep the grant reporting portion in the application. Both the Tourism Advisory Committee and in the research that we did, we found that it helped to bolster accountability, assist in the understanding and measuring of the success of the program, and we do believe it will lead to increased and sustainable tourism. Additionally, all other cities that we researched with a similar tourism promotion grant did require a performance measure report. So again, we stuck with that precedent. I did also want to note that in the original application, and we kept it this way as well, that there was only one statistical metric that they need to report on, even though there are several samples. We're only asking for one of those. The question about public art came up at the March 15th meeting, and the question of, can this program pay for public art? It's difficult to see a way to fit public art into this program. The funding source is restricted to tourism promotion through the ORS and the municipal code, so that limits us by state law and city code. Guidelines do not explicitly prohibit public art, so theoretically, an application related to public art could conceivably be submitted, and the applicant and review committee would need to then find that all eligibility and funding requirements related to tourism promotion are met. The cost implications here, the revenue source is the tourism lodging tax surplus funds. As you know, the TLT comes from tax that is collected from visitors that stay overnight here in hotels and lodging facilities. To ensure sustainability, it is important to attract tourists from a distance so that they're likely to stay overnight. We know that our merchants and our restaurants and other services will expectedly also benefit, but targeting activities that will lead to the overnight stays will lead to sustainability of the program long term. We do expect an influx of applications. We've had a lot of interest so far. Funds would be established by the council annually, and during the budget process. We are hoping that we can establish that this evening, though, as well. Other cities have similar programs. They usually designate $80,000 to $100,000 annually for these types of services or programs. And tonight, staff is recommending $35,000 to be the initial funding amount. This was a recommendation initially put out in October by the finance department. They had looked at the numbers available and felt this was a comfortable number to use. So this evening, the call to action is at council discretion. You can move to action or, again, move it to an additional workshop. Your alternatives are to approve the proposed sustainable grant program and designate a funding amount, modify it, deny it, or here's a potential motion for you.
Thank you, Dana. Are there any questions? Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Dana. I like most of the changes that you've incorporated. So one question on the twice yearly application scheduling. Does that necessarily mean that someone who's approved, let's say in the spring cycle, is going to have an event, let's say in the next 6 months, or can they be approved in the spring cycle for something that's going to occur in the fall or the winter?
They can be approved when the funding is established. They have 1 year to spend the funds from the date they're awarded. So they honestly could probably apply in either cycle, depending on when their event is falling or their activities are falling, and be able to have access.
So
it will require a little bit of planning on the part of the applicant.
So if, let's say we had a spring cycle and the 35,000, the full 35,000 were allotted, then the fall cycle would automatically be people that were applying for the following spring, basically, when the fund is replenished?
The fall cycle was established partially because there was a concern that what if all of the funds weren't spent?
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons why we established it.
Right.
We could establish more funds. It really depends on what happens a little bit. This is a new program.
Okay.
So if for example, the 35,000 was spent, we might not have a fall cycle. But if the council decided they wanted to designate more funds because they saw the benefit, we could then do that too.
Yeah, I like that change. It makes sense to me. So I have a question, two more questions, I think, maybe three. On page 52 of the packet, it says that after the first year of the program, staff will assess the process and grants and can make adjustments as necessary. I mean, should that be more correctly stating that the staff will recommend making adjustments as necessary, or does the staff have the ability to just do it on their own?
No, certainly we would make recommendations, and then we could make those changes. You can make those changes.
That's not what it says, but okay, thank you.
Apologies.
Then I also have on page 61 of the packet, one of the, when it says describe, this is in the application, describe your goals and expected impact on tourism and economic growth. How do you plan to track, measure, and evaluate the results on your goals? In other words, overnight stays, attendance 50 miles, et cetera. And I'm just wondering if, well, that's a skill set that DMO people would be, very, very adept at. But I'm just wondering if someone's having a first-year event, to me it would make more sense for DMO or for staff to be able to make suggestions to an event organizer as to how they could do those things, rather than essentially demanding that an event organizer have the wherewithal to understand how to do those things. So it kind of bothers me a little bit that is in there, and with essentially, it's not necessarily a requirement, but someone's going to get a higher score if somehow they know it. But I don't know if you could have a first-year event organizer really being expected to know how to use those tools, or what tools are even available. So to me, I'd rather have the staff working with, or DMO staff working with someone to help them achieve that, rather than having it be on the application as something they're expected to be able to do. Did you give any thought to that, or?
Yeah, we are available to answer questions prior to the applications being submitted. So I do imagine people are going to inquire, we're going to give them more information, and if they do have questions, they can come to us and we can provide more information. I think part of this is to challenge people to think about how this is really having an impact on tourism. And so I don't necessarily think it'll lead to a bad score because somebody has it's their first time out there. I think it'll be helpful to see that they have thought about it and how they might try and track that.
Thank you. And one last thing, and I'll leave it to somebody else. So on the final page, when it talks about, I guess, what someone needs to, requirements, it says, my company has an anti-discrimination policy. Policy states that my company does not discriminate with respect to race, color, creed, sex, age, national origin, disability, religion, sexual orientation, and complies with affirmative action programs and all applicable federal, state, and local laws. So what affirmative action programs are you referring to?
I don't have a very specific answer for that, but I think this is obviously a general statement that we thought would be good to have included to ensure that people are being fair in their...
Well, without a specific answer, I don't think it should be in there, number one. Okay. Number two, affirmative action, by its definition, means discriminating against, putting one group in front of another group. So on the one hand, you're asking people to promise not to discriminate on all those reasonable grounds. The other hand, you're asking them to discriminate, potentially, but not saying where or how. So I guess without a specific answer from you, when it comes to it, I'm going to suggest that council remove the affirmative action part of that statement. Thank you.
I understand. Thank you.
Generically speaking, if I could kind of speak to that, I think that's our boilerplate language for when we grant any money, because the city is connected.
So what specifically are you talking about with regards to affirmative action?
That's more of a legal question that I guess this would be better to answer, but I believe that's kind of the generic contract language that goes into all of those agreements. I don't know the specifics as far as affirmative action, but the other ones, we just try and make sure that there isn't a discrimination.
I understand the other ones, and the affirmative action, again, is discriminatory in nature, so I'm just wondering, we're going in both directions with that statement, and without specifics, I couldn't support it.
Okay, well, the question was asked, and if it wasn't answered to your satisfaction, you can vote as you wish when it comes up. I have a list here, so I think Brian, and then Dwayne, and then Joel.
Thank you, Dana. So just to be clear, this grant program is only for promotion of events, so marketing of the events. It's not anything to do with actually putting on the event. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. I had a question about the grant reporting. It says financial summary. Basically, they have to generate a financial summary for the city. Is part of that financial summary producing receipts for what they have spent? Or what are the parameters of that financial summary, I guess?
Yes, that is what the financial summary would include, are the receipts that were spent. They would have to submit those eligible funds for reimbursement.
Okay, great. That's all for now, thanks.
Okay.
Dwayne.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, or JC. So you say a surplus. Have we maxed out all the other areas that surplus can go?
So this is just the portion that is specific to tourism promotion. And so that's 40%, and 28% of that goes to the DMO. So there's a 12%-ish kind of gap there that the city uses to try and promote. And so it hasn't been historically spending all of its 12%. And so what this is aimed to do is to try and spend part of that 12% and also gain more revenues, because the thought process is if we can get other events and other people traveling in, it'll bolster our transient lodging tax dollars.
So you're saying that all the transient lodging tax surplus that's been spent in other areas has been spent, and this just...
The unspent money is just specific to the...
Can't be used no other place.
Can't be used any other place.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Joel.
Well, I just thought Rob had an interesting comment. It's actually the EEO Act. It's a federal legislation, and there's case law then that's built on that, but there's protected classes under the Equal Employment Act. And we just need to make sure that that is consistent with the federal law. And then if there's any case law that modified that with affirmative action, that's reflected. But that's where that comes from. It's a federal law. And you know, whether it's Rogue Retreat or tourism or whatever, you open yourself up to being sued if you don't abide by federal law.
Do we have any more questions for Dana? No? Okay, thank you, Dana. Is there anyone from the public who wanted to speak on this issue? No. Okay, we'll close public comment and turn it back to council for discussion. Rob and Val.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation, Joel, and it might actually be reasonable. So we can still remove the affirmative action wording there, because the last part of that sentence is, it says it complies with all applicable federal, state, and local laws. So that would cover it, even if taking out the affirmative action part. Thank you.
Valerie.
I guess I'm unclear here a little bit, because this is different than affirmative action. Isn't this comment, isn't the DEI statement separate than affirmative action? Because this is just, affirmative action is saying that you're going to open it up to where everybody can have the same opportunity. This is just saying we're not going to discriminate against anybody. So to me, those are two different things. It is. And so to me, this is just like a blanket statement that, you know, has become popular in governmental, anything doing with governmental that just basically says you're covering yourself from a liability simply says is we're not going to discriminate. We're not going to say, no, we're not going to give any money to the powwow because they're whatever. We're not going to do that. This is open to everybody. It doesn't mean that we have to have so many of this or so many of that, which is what affirmative action is. So they're two very different things. So that's why, to me, this is not affirmative action. This is just basically saying we're not going to discriminate, and we need to do that because it's money that's coming in through a governmental agency.
On I want to get this show on the road, so I do have one little concern. The grant range goes from 2,500 to 10,000, and given that we're only allocating 35,000 this year, if those are maxed out, that could potentially only go to 4 grantees, which seems like maybe if we reduce that 10,000 to 5,000, then it could potentially go to, up to 7 grantees, which might be a little more equitable. So I'm going to go ahead and move to adopt the resolution establishing the Sustainable Tourism Grant Program and designate funds for the first grant cycle with the amendment of reducing the maximum grant amount from 10,000 to 5,000 and to remove the language from the anti-discrimination policy section, specifically only the words affirmative action programs and. So it reads, and complies with all applicable federal, state, and local laws.
Seconded by, who was that, Rob? Okay, discussion, Joel?
Well, it might be a requirement of the federal law that wording is included in all money. So you don't want to put out a contract that violates federal law. So I would think before we do that and exclude that wording, that we look at that federal law and see what it requires. Because I think if I remember correctly, it requires that announcement in any advertisement that goes, or any bids, opting for bids. So, we can disobey federal law if it is there, but I'm not sure that's a wise move.
Valerie?
Yeah, I also have a little bit of problem with the reducing the 10,000 because I think that's not our role. I think it's a role of the criteria and the committee that's there. I think they know what to do. I think when you really do look at promoting and going, to communities outside and advertising and from promoting and some of the things that might be needed to build up their success rate by hiring somebody to do pictures and build a website. It's just, there's a lot of things there that we don't understand that committee might. And I do like the fact that the DMO is involved with it because those are the sorts of things that they do know. So I'm going to vote no because I think we need to just adopt it as it is written right here, the potential motion.
Rob?
Yeah, and I just, again, need to respond to Joel. The last part of that sentence, Joel, says, and all applicable federal, state, and local laws. So if it's applicable, if the affirmative action is applicable, then we're covered. But if it's not applicable, then we're not adding anything that is superfluous.
Joel?
And if you're right, we can eliminate it. If you're not, we can get sued. So I just suggest we do a little bit of research on it, and if we have that latitude, then that's fine. And if we don't, then I would guess that we need to go along with, be consistent with federal law.
Rick?
So Aaron, do you have any indication if we approve this with all applicable federal and state and local laws, and such laws require the verbiage affirmative active programs, we can put it back in there without coming back to a new motion? Because we want to have this program comply, and if that's a requirement, then even the motion that stands tonight, do we have that ability to put it inserted in there?
Because of the discussion that I'm hearing today on the dais, I would recommend that if it's taken out and it is required to be in, then I want to bring it back to council so everyone's on the same page and aware, and you're adopting it with the required language.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Brian?
I want to amend my motion to basically state that we're going to remove it now, but upon staff research, if it's found that it is required, that it would be reinserted without having to talk about it again.
Seconded by Rob? Okay. So the motion would now be to approve the grant application, or excuse me, the grant program with a range of $2,500 to $5,000 and remove the affirmative action statement unless it's required, at which point the city manager could put it back in without coming to the council for discussion. All right. Are we ready to vote? All right. Brian, you made the motion. How do you vote?
Yes.
Valerie?
No.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Vanessa? I think I heard a tiny yes.
Yeah, squeak.
Okay, motion passes 5-2. All right. Made the mistake of looking at the agenda tonight and thinking this would be a quick one. I think we've made our way to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on items not related to a public hearing or council action item on tonight's agenda. The intent is to provide information that is pertinent to the city's jurisdiction. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to address the council as one body, not two individuals. At the conclusion of public comment, council will have an opportunity to respond. This meeting will proceed in an effective and courteous manner. Citizens and council members will be allowed to state their positions in an atmosphere free from slander, threats, or other personal attacks. Signs or placards, outbursts of applause, campaigning for public office, or other disruptive behavior will not be tolerated. If you have a question regarding any government-provided service or a current city policy, please contact the city manager's office in an attempt to resolve the matter. And when you come up to the podium, there is a light that comes on. When the yellow light comes on, you have 30 seconds left. When it turns red, it means that your 3 minutes are up, and I would appreciate it if you would stop promptly. I think Dennis has spoken and left. Mark Jones.
Good morning, or evening, whatever day it is. Mark Jones, county resident, not a city dweller. As elected officials, city management, and department heads, the citizens of Grants Pass expect you to make decisions that have their best interest in mind. You're in a position that requires you to be a servant to the people. Serving the citizens and securing their communities should be your #1 priority. Fire and life safety, along with law enforcement, provides these communities with the security and peace of mind that all citizens need and deserve. I ask that you all take a good look at your souls right now. Look deep and ask yourself, am I serving or self-serving? If you have a serving soul, you'll put others before yourself as much as possible. As a serving counselor, you'll put the constituents before your own popularity, your own social circles, or your own bias. You strive to serve the citizens the best way you can in order to provide the best outcome for the community. Now take a look at the firefighters and police officers serving this community. These brave men and women serve the community to the best of their ability, even with the restrictions your budgetary restraints have placed on them. Serving others is in their blood. They are born to do the job, to drop everything and respond to emergencies at a moment's notice. They are caring and compassionate, serving this city with true heart and soul. If you are a serving soul, you'll partner with these firefighters and police officers by providing the level of law enforcement, fire and life safety services the citizens deserve. Unfortunately, there may be some here tonight who are self-serving. Webster defines this as overly concerned with one's own desires, needs, or interests. As you can see, self-serving is just that. Serving one's self-interest in whatever capacity you can. This may look like one of you making a decision that may be detrimental to the citizens, but make you look good to those in your circle. One may make a decision that pads their resume while taking services from those in need. Self-serving could also come in the form of
pushing a department to make cuts that result in poor service delivery to the public to increase the chance of getting a bonus. There may be ways to there may be ways one can be self-serving and anyone can do it. It takes a special person with a good soul to be truly serving. Show us that you are not self-serving and that you will do everything you can to stop the cuts for police and fire services that citizens need in this city. Thank you.
Bracken Sharp.
Left a light on for me. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Bracken Sharp. I'm the Vice President of the Grants Pass Professional Firefighters, IAFF Local 3564. I'm sure you can guess what I'm here to speak about tonight. I do hope that you took a few minutes to review the exit survey responses that I had sent out to everybody. Was it yesterday? That we had sent out to 14 members that have left in the last 14 years. All of those that have left for other agencies are still with the agency that they left for, and not a single one responded that they left to make more money. They left for job stability, not having to worry about levy and staffing. The two that we are losing next month will make 16 in 14 years. 16 firefighters gone in 14 years. Every time we lose a well-trained, high-level firefighter, we start from scratch with new recruits and cost the city upwards of $80,000 just to train and years to make up the institutional knowledge that we continually lose. Fiscal year 24 proposed budget cuts were presented to you Monday at a workshop. Fire Rescue presented a budget with over $688,000 worth of cuts that included freezing the hiring of 3 line firefighters and a deputy chief, cutting the student program, and most importantly, closing the Hillcrest Fire Station. The police department, which has a budget and personnel more than double the size of Fire Rescue, proposed cuts around $766,000, freezing a captain position, losing a community service officer, and the cadet program. You cannot compare police and fire apples to apples. Fire Rescue has run on a shoestring budget and understaffed for decades. You cannot expect the fire department to make such drastic cuts to get an equal cut from police and fire. Freezing 3 much-needed firefighter positions in a department that is severely understaffed is sending us backwards. It will kill morale, increase workload for those individuals being force hired on their days off, increase the risk of injury, and increase overtime, all with summer just around the corner, which is our busiest time. We are asking for a decision to be made to help your fire department so that we can continue providing the high-level professional fire and emergency response that our community deserves. I cannot overstate the fact that the fire department is a vital public service that provides essential protection to our community. The fire department is understaffed and underfunded, which is putting our community at risk. The proposed budget cuts will only make the situation worse, and I urge you to reconsider the proposed budget cuts and invest in your fire department. Thank you.
Alan Hartford.
Good evening. My name is Alan Hartford. I'm a city resident. I'm here to comment on the budget workshop that was held the other day. And I first want to commend you all for the important questions you did ask. You were probative, and it shows that you're trying to take these matters seriously. But I have some severe concerns about some of the things that were discussed. My wife and I moved here last summer. We decided to settle down in the city because we liked the more robust services the city offered. Those services aren't available in the county, as you're well aware, with police and fire. This is important to me because I know where you are. We've been on these types of cuts. I spent 34 years in fire service, retired. Then I was a paramedic and EMT for another 6 years, so 40 years in public service. I've served on 3 different departments, from a 30-station department all the way down to a 1-station department. And my concern is that in these years, I've seen how budget cuts can affect what goes on. I also see how hard those cuts are to make. My real concern, when you were talking about cutting one of your fire stations, it was mentioned in the presentations that it was like cutting the 3rd leg off a 3-legged stool. Your fire department here is a good fire department. We moved here because I like the looks of the fire department. My concern is that it's no longer going to be a good department. So my first concern, when that really comes into it, is what happens to your personnel? We've already heard that they become disillusioned and they leave. Well, you have a retention problem, and that was brought up during the workshop also. The other problem you have is it's not like in past years where you had 100 candidates lining up for a single position. Oftentimes now you cannot hire the amount of candidates opening that you have because you don't have enough people that are qualified for that position. Why do I know these things? I worked my way up from firefighter all the way to fire chief. I've had to close 7 apparatus during the Great Recession. I know how tough that was when we closed those stations. It wasn't easy, and it was a terrible effect on the communities that we served. Fortunately, we were a very large department. That was still almost a third of our force. So those types of things aren't to be taken lightly. And when you're talking about, do we cut out fireworks or close a fire station, those two shouldn't even be in the same conversation. The fireworks and stuff should already be taken care of, gone, and over with before you get to those types of drastic types of decisions. So I'm just here to encourage you to keep, looking into all the different aspects of it. And if there's anything I can do to assist in helping with my past experience in this, I'm a resident of the city now. I love the city, and I want to see the city succeed. So thank you very much.
Julie Hartford.
Good evening, I'm Julie Hartford, and I'm also a resident of Grants Pass. I'm here tonight to also speak on behalf of the fire department. Most of you know I'm very passionate about helping the homeless find a path to being housed. And I know that the first responders in our city are often where the rubber meets the road on that issue. I've spent years around firefighters because of my husband, and recently I've had the opportunity to get to know the firefighters here in Grants Pass. And I've gotten to socialize with them, and we've become a member of the firefighting family that is here in town. When you listen to firefighters talk about their job, you learn a lot about what kind of firefighter they are, and a lot about the community that they serve and the fire department that they work for. And I'm here to tell you that in Grants Pass, we are very lucky to have a group of dedicated professional firefighters that truly care about their community and the citizens who live here. They work very hard serving our community. I'm asking for you to do whatever you can, and I know it's what you want, to support the firefighters in their budget. And I would also encourage each of you to go on a ride-along with the fire department. It's something that you can do, and it would really help you learn more about what they do. Thank you.
Brandon Rigo.
Hello, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brandon Rigo. I'm a Northeast Grants Pass resident. I'm speaking today to discuss fire department funding, particularly the issues that have been plaguing our fire department for the last 30 years. As you know, our fire department is responsible for protecting the lives and property of our citizens in Grants Pass. In fact, our fire rescue department is currently an ISO 2 for insurance purposes, which puts the fire department in the top 4.1% of the 43,000 fire departments at ISO rates. So you're getting a pretty good service there. They do that by responding to fires, traffic accidents, medicals, and other emergencies every day of the year with well-trained firefighters, mutual aid assistance, and quality, well-maintained equipment. In recent years, though, the fire department has been facing a number of challenges, including the positional freezes, aging of fleet, shortage of firefighters to meet call volumes and types of the incidents, especially with the severity of them, and then an overall lack of funding and staffing. These challenges have continued to put a strain on the fire department's ability to provide the level of service that our community requires. So, for example, over year, we went from near 6% increase in calls in 2022. The 2017 Standards of Coverage document that was produced identified that all of our engines were understaffed. And today we're discussing, once again, cutting the fire department further. This has effects that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of and discussed. One of them is the aforementioned ISO rating. If we lose a fire station, it more than likely will have ramifications to insurance rates that the public pays. So although they may save money in other areas, they may have to spend more to insure their property. Call concurrency is a way to rate how often fire engines are available. With only 2 fire engines, you will not have engines available at the same rate that you do today. And lastly, we're putting our safety of our community in jeopardy. Last year, there were 66 structure fires and 51 vegetation fires, in addition to car fires, trash fires, et cetera, that the fire department responded to. And as we know, just 25 minutes south of us in Alameda, a large vegetation fire in the urban interface burned 2,500 homes. So I'm here today to tell you, or ask you, I should say, to take action to address the funding issues. And I believe that we need to invest in our fire department so that we can continue to provide the level of service that our citizens need. We cannot rely on our neighboring departments to pick up the slack. If we want to keep Grants Pass safe, then we must find a solution that not only allows the fire department to exist in its current state, but to continue to meet the growing demands of our community. I know that we're facing a budget shortfall, but I believe that we can find a way to fund our fire department without a levy long term. In the short term, I support the water rate and levy, which gives the city time to work on building a fire district or other funding options to maintain fire services. Thank you.
David Dapper?
Hi, my name is David Dapper, and we know why I'm here. I understand the wonderful tree day we had in the parks. I wish my wife would feel safe to go in the parks and enjoy it. And the 3 children next door on either side that say they can't go there because the bad man's going to get them. We just found some guy with meth paraphernalia and his 40 living in the girls' bathroom or the women's bathroom at one of the parks. And now we talked about the parking code. Maybe we could help fund the fire department and help support our police with some code enforcement, authorizing Chief Hensman to enforce some codes. We could maybe have some non-camping areas in the park that working people and normal people, retired people could go to and feel safe. And these people, most of them, given by the fact that the gospel mission has open beds and the warming shelters never got past half filled up, don't want a building. We don't need to buy a building. We need to just set apart like across from the youth authority and tell them, let them live there, but not in the park, so people can use the parks again and feel safe. I mean, this is bad. And someone said earlier there aren't so many needles in the parks. Well, there were over 200 needles found in Baker's Park a while ago, and so that might be a little bit of a problem. This is bad. And you want tourism? How about back to the 50s? Come on, let's do that. Oh, no, we can't do that because it's not safe. Okay, well, how about our concerts in the park? Let's have them in the park. No, we can't do that because it's not safe. My wife won't even go in our front yard anymore. And we have a beautiful front yard. My niece was out in the front yard, and she comes in and tells me one of the animals is trying to live in the bushes across the street and leering at her, women and children. That's why my wife won't go in there. She gets verbally assaulted, and she just won't go anymore. We need to give Chief Hensman some authority and not tie his hands. The parks, instead of playing whack-a-mole, let's say, okay, it's all run by one parks department, so when you get trespassed from the parks department, you're out of all the parks, not just, chasing them from here to there. If they can't live by the rules, like my mean old boss made me follow some rules, it was unfair and I cried every day, but that's life. And let's have some rules like the rest of us have to live by. And thank you, Chief Hensman.
No outbursts of applause. Matthew?
Hello. So before I first start, I'd like to say I'm not impressed with the water fountain that I just went by in the men's room. You can't even get water out of it without trying to get hepatitis or some other disease by getting close to it. So we need to make this place accessible to the public when the public comes, so if we can have that addressed. Now to my prepared comments. I come before the City Council today as a concerned concerned resident and believe when the problem exists, like homelessness in my city, one can take the unproductive approaches that includes harassment and legal engagement methods with those by a lack of housing or the opportunity to be off the streets, or one can take the approach that I have taken. I've been a volunteer with the warming shelter. I was a paid staff member and a volunteer with the Ramsey Shelter. I've attended the groundbreaking at the Foundry Village. My church does a food ministry program with Foundry Village. And I've also come to this council meeting with an actual solution. I bring a solution and not just rhetoric. Not all solutions are likable. I have to say I don't like what I propose. Governing isn't about being liked, it's about leadership. I asked the council to think about the water treatment plant that has been approved to be built. Eminent domain was used to displace an existing business structure for the good of the community. Not going on record that eminent domain should be the solution to all problems, simply, if my city council found the value in displacing the functioning business for the purpose of maintaining sanitation practices for sewage, then I find value in proposing that we no longer use the bowling alley on the North Grants Pass near Vine Street, should be considered for an urban campground, and if the building is suitable, rehab that building, excuse me, for more comprehensive navigation center purposes. I'm made aware, not sure how, from working on the subject, that the owners of the vacant lot alley have rejected opportunities to sell that particular building. Well, we know how that worked for the place where the wastewater treatment plant is going. If we will settle for eminent domain for a treatment sewage in the name of public good, then I find no legitimate argument for why this won't solve and we shouldn't consider homelessness solution here in Grants Pass. There are some obnoxious posts on social media, including threats against the community's unhoused neighbors, rightfully claiming our parks need to return to their purpose. Frankly, it is sad that our parks are not being used for their intended recreation. Yet, what would we do for the unhoused? There are, from legal rulings and moral righteousness, understanding that a person needs a place to sleep and exist. Get a job, one might say. Navigation centers can help with this, and I can go into further details as a credentialed social worker. But I truly think this is an opportunity to show leadership.
Brian Buteller?
Hello, and thank you for having me. I am not a resident of Grants Pass. I live in Rogue River for the last 2 years. I've worked in Grants Pass, and I am the executive director of the Gospel Rescue Mission, and have worked there for the last 13 and a half years. And I am also the executive director of the county's largest food pantry, the Rock Food Pantry in Grants Pass. So I have 2 jobs dealing with people who are poor. I had an interesting day yesterday that I thought was kind of applicable. As I came into work, I got done from the gym, and I came and I saw a guy camping on one of our neighbors' porches from the mission, a neighbor that lives near the mission, and he was camping on their front porch, and I didn't know if he had permission or not, but I saw a tent there, and I saw a shopping cart and some bags. I assumed there was a homeless guy there. I generally come in and get out of the gym and want to change because I just got out of the gym, and before I'm done changing, I hear all this yelling going on from outside, and so I walked down to see what was going on, and there was a crowd of about a half a dozen people outside of the little mini market across the street yelling obscenities at a guy who, the same guy who was camping on the neighbor's porch, had lit his tent on fire and had piled up a bunch of trash and was sitting outside of it smoking a cigarette, getting warm in the morning as he's burning this tent right on the deck, the wooden deck of somebody who was not apparently at their place of residence. I walked out and I said, well, has anybody called 911? And they said, yeah. And then they went to shouting obscenities. I walked back into the mission and grabbed a fire extinguisher and then walked across and put the fire out. The fire had gotten pretty sizable at that point, and I wasn't going to wait for the fire department to show up and potentially damage my neighbor's home.
Then I walked back, and about the time I got across the street, law enforcement got there, and then an ambulance got there, and two fire trucks got there, and everybody gathered around to take care of this. And I just thought it was kind of ironic and kind of resembled what we're doing in the community a lot. You know, you guys are here volunteering. You're here doing your job, and there's a lot of people that you're doing the hard work. A lot of people are standing across the street yelling obscenities at you and telling you how you're failing and all of this, and you're in there volunteering to do the work, and I feel like that's the work that the Gospel Rescue Mission does. What we do is we get results, and my hope is that we would be invited to the table repeatedly when it comes to how do we solve the problem. The mission has answers for how we solve the problem. We've been doing it for 40 years. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wanted to speak during comment tonight? Please step up to the mic and tell us your name and whether or not you live in the city.
Okay. Sorry I didn't fill out the blue form. My name's Danielle Neeson. I've been here since 2012. And, you know, I grew up here until I was about 5. And one of my favorite memories was going to the parks, especially Riverside. And when I first moved here, I would go and play disc golf. And it wasn't an issue, but now it is, I'm scared. I'm scared to even walk to the park by myself. And I do not have a solution. I think that maybe like the bowling alley idea. I think that was decent. You know, if we could put them all together. But the thing is, I mean, I feel stupid coming up to you guys without a solution. But I do want to say the homeless issue is really killing this city. And we want to talk about tourism and attracting people here. Well, concerts in the park isn't even a thing anymore. It's going to be at the fairgrounds. That's not concerts in the park. So anyway, I just wanted to come here and let you guys know that it's getting scarier out there. And there's more and more homeless. I don't have a solution, but it concerns me very greatly. Thank God I don't have children, but the girlfriends I do have that have kids, they don't take them to the park anymore. So anyway, I guess that's all I had to say is just I'm worried about the homeless population and what they're doing, not only to the parks, but people that want to sell their houses, such as Dave over here, lives across from the park. You think his house is going to sell for nearly as much with all of that in front of his house? Anyway, thank you for your time.
Anyone else who wanted to speak tonight?
Yeah, my name's Robert Neerman. I own Going Rogue Jerky here on 6th Street. I'm 100% of everything what everybody said about the homeless here. I can't help think that it's hurting my business, getting people to walk downtown. I'll be lucky if my business survives to the rest of this year. And I feel a lot of it is because of the homeless issue. We're not getting the city to come out. They don't want to come to the streets anymore. I can just about guarantee you my business will be closed by the end of this year if we don't straighten up this problem. They've taken over the parks. We can't go to the parks. Concerts in the park is gone. Now the 50s car show is getting moved out of the park. Why? So we can tolerate it for the homeless. For my business and the survival of downtown Grants Pass, I ask that you guys do something about this, because my business is going to close. I moved up here in 2019 with a better vision of this town, and it's going nothing but downhill.
Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Catherine Hamilton, and I live in the county. I have a 9-year-old son, and like the other people say, I can't go to the park. I don't have to carry a gun to the park. We've seen needles, we've seen people hiding, cowering in bushes, seen women in the women's bathroom with backpacks, and you watch them, and a car will pull up, and one of the ladies come out of the bathroom, and they stick their head in the car, and they talk for a few minutes, then they go back in. They're dealing drugs. And since the decriminalization of drugs in this state, I don't know how this makes sense. Okay, they tried it, it hasn't worked. I don't know what the numbers were of the homeless prior to the decriminalization of drugs, but I would bet it's not what it is now. I go to the post office here on 6th Street. I bring my son into the post office. A gentleman comes in and starts having a yelling fit to the self-service mail machine. I do not feel it's necessarily a homeless problem. I feel it's primarily a drug problem, and their brains have been fried. The churches, the homeless shelters, they have beds. Why do they have beds? Because the drug addicts are shooting up in our parks and leaving the needles and leaving the garbage. And me trying to explain to my son, well, you know, we can't go to the park this week. I don't have answers. You guys give me the opportunity to come up here, I'm griping. I'm not pointing fingers at any of you folks. I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I think this is a criminal situation. When we sit there and call the people walking down the street zombies, they're having complete conversations with themselves. They don't look like they have earpieces. It's very frustrating, it's frightening. It's frightening me telling my son, if somebody offers you anything at school, don't take it. Don't take the pretty colors, because fentanyl is now coming in rainbow colors. And if you can see fentanyl, apparently it can kill you. So you don't even have to touch it. You don't even have to put it in your mouth. Anyway, folks, thank you for letting us speak. It's late. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Did anyone want to respond? Dwayne?
Yeah, I have some comments I wrote down. So, comments to the firefighter people, I just want to know, what are your suggestions to pay for firefighters? Because obviously we don't have money. I'd just like to know, I received texts, emails from probably several people, and it's not question time, David, so, but I just wanted to know how do you want us to pay for the firefighters? If there's money you want me to use, let me know, because I want to know where this money's at, and who else do I need to cut that's not a firefighter. So I just want to know this. I do want you guys, but if the people don't want to give us money, how do we pay for something? And that's my question, is how do we pay for things if people don't want to give us money? And that's the taxpayers. I just want people to understand that some of these things you're complaining about are not council's making. I know I do complain about the council sometimes, but Measure 110, look around and find one of your buddies that voted for it. Tell them you're upset with it. Tell them you're upset with it, because over 50% of the people in this state voted for it. I don't know who voted for it up here, but it definitely wasn't me. So tell your governor that you don't want 110. Tell your state representative. The 72-hour rule, thank your governor for that. That's Tina Kotek's. It's not us. We didn't do that. That's Tina pushed it through, and now she's your governor. So complain to her why they keep tying our hands and making this happen to us, because we can't change those laws. We don't make those types of laws up here. We make ordinances. And then I'm going to talk about the enablers in the park. You know, I went down there Thursday, 9:30, and I watched the enabling of bad behavior, blankets, needles, clothing, and guess where all that ends up at? There's all kinds of stuff. It ends up all over the park, and guess who has to pick it up? Our Parks Department. So get mad at these nonprofits. They're the ones supplying all this garbage that goes in the parks. I didn't supply it. I'm not sure any of these people up here supplied it. I haven't seen them down there giving out it. But those are the people supplying the garbage to the parks. You're upset with needles? Talk to Max's Mission. because I'm sure the city is not buying needles. In fact, I have some recommendations. Maybe they'll take, for every one needle they hand out, maybe they'll take 3 back. That would probably help. Pick up your needles. If you're going to feed people, go around and pick up all the styrofoam stuff. Pick up all the trash, the food, the canned food that's sitting down there, the clothing. Trust me, I go to those parks tons of the time, and all of them complain to me because I send them pictures of all the garbage down there. I'm with you. I'm tired of seeing it, but we're not the ones supplying it. I'll give them that. They're not up here supplying. We don't hand stuff out at the city saying, here's a blanket, here's a tarp, a tent. That's the nonprofits. And Brian does have 40 men beds and 45 women and children beds at the mission. So until that's full, I don't think we have a problem. Oh, and the U-Haul owns the old bowling alley. If you're here last meeting, they own the bowling alley, and they're not going to give it up because we just expanded that stuff. So the bowling alley is not on the table. It belongs to someone else. Thank you.
Anybody else? Valerie?
We're all frustrated, and I thank you for coming in and keeping us, we'll be as accountable as we can. We are volunteers, and we are trying to work behind the scenes to get things done. So we're not only just coming to meetings here, but we're having meetings, in other places. We're doing what we can. We're meeting with our lawyer. This lawsuit has become an animal, unfortunately, and I feel I'm kind of I feel frustrated because I feel, as Dwight brought up, was the fact that a lot of these things come from our legislatures up in Salem, and we don't have, if it becomes a state law, we can't change it. And so we have a lot of things that come from up north, and a lot of, like the court system, the injunction, it just gets drawn out and drawn out and drawn out. So we're working on what we can control and trying to find out if we can control more than we think we do. So those questions are being asked, and I invite you to come in. I'm always happy when I see a lot of people here because that means that people are watching. I love it when I hear people watch us on television and watch our sessions and know what's going on, because that's what it takes. It takes a community of people being involved and watching what's going on to make any changes. So thank you for that.
Anybody else? Rob?
Yeah, I generally don't respond to comments that I think are kind of out of line, kind of let them sit and kind of for view on their own merits or demerits. But this time I'm going to make an exception. I think that, I believe his name is Mark Jones, when he came up and was questioning whether or not, I guess, the counselors are self-serving, questioning whether or not we're making decisions in our best interest, questioning whether or not we're making decisions for our own popularity. And I think that was amazingly off base. I mean, I've owned a retail store in this town for a long time, and I can tell you my public positions on many things have cost me a lot of business because they're not necessarily popular. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. If I can break even on my decisions, as far as popularity goes, I'm thinking I'm way ahead of the game if I can break even. So from what I see of my fellow counselors, and I probably know most of them better than Mark Jones does, I don't see any self-serving there either. So, and again, I don't normally get into antagonistic discussion with someone, especially if they can't answer back, and if he ever wanted to discuss it with me further, I would be open to that briefly. But to me, that was just so off base. And I've got so many things, and we all have so many things we could be doing tonight, or we could have been doing Monday, or we could be doing 2 Wednesday nights from now, and we're not. We're here, trying to work out some problems. It may not be to your satisfaction, Mr. Jones. It doesn't sound like they are, or you're worried that they might not be. But that's not really my concern with pleasing you as one individual. So, we're doing what we can here, and it's not self-serving. So, I would even accept an apology in an email if you'd like, or not. That's fine. You're entitled to review. And again, briefly, I would even discuss it with you outside at some point. But
All right,
you didn't win a friend from me tonight.
Rob, we do
by saying
ask that the public not comment to individual counselors, so let's try to not talk to one individual person. Let's move on to the emails.
There was one email against the utility fee for public safety, one titled Funding Methods for Police and Fire Shortfall, one titled Signage for East Park Street and Other Near Parks, and two regarding life at East Park Street.
Thank you. All right, consent agenda is up next. What time is it? Okay. So the consent agenda is items of such routine nature without controversy that they may be approved with a single action. And Valerie, would you please read the consent agenda?
Okay, consent agenda for April 19th, 2023. Item A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract for the Laurel Street and Mary Street water main and sewer replacement, project number WA6360. B, motion approving the comprehensive plan map and zone map findings of fact. C, motion approving the minutes of the city council meeting of April 5th, 2023, and then several motions and acknowledged minutes from various committees. Tourism Advisory Committee for March 7th, 2023, Urban Tree Advisory Committee, March 13th, 2023, Committee on Public Art, March 14th, 2023, Bikeways and Walkways, March 14th, 2023, and the Urban Area Planning Commission, March 8th, 2023. And with that, I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Seconded by Joel. Valerie, how do you vote on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Dwayne?
Yes.
Joel?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Vanessa?
Yes.
Passes 7-0. Matters from mayor, council, and staff. I was going to ask you all, we have had a request, I met with the committee chair people a couple weeks ago now, and we had a good meeting. One of the things that came up regarding the UAPC, they've had some challenges, I guess, with a vacancy. That's one of the positions appointed by the county. So the UAPC is our planning commission. The county has their own planning commission, and we have an intergovernmental agreement with them where they are appointing 4 members of our UAPC. The UAPC is interested in ending the IGA and asking for our support. So we talked about this at the agenda setting meeting last week, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to move forward with asking staff to draft a new, I guess it wouldn't be a new IGA, but it would be a statement or something for us to vote on and to propose to the commissioners that would end the current IGA and restructure the committee a little bit. What the committee had proposed was to do 6 members who live within the city limits and 2 who could live within the urban growth boundary. So you don't have to, I know this is new. If you want to comment right now, you can. Otherwise, if you want to just get back to us within the next week or two, if you have any, strong thoughts one way or the other, that would be fine too, since I'm putting you on the spot here. Rick?
Do we know how many members on that committee are located outside the urban growth boundary, basically Josephine County? We have 2?
Well, they have to be within the urban growth boundary, and some of them have to be within the city limits. So my understanding is that there's 1 right now who lives in the urban growth area, but not in the city limits. And so the proposal from the chair was to keep all the current members of the committee and just slide them into, appropriate positions.
That's what I was looking for, to maintain the current and then have it phase out or whatever. Thank you.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, I'm interested in looking at doing that.
Okay. Do you want me to just move forward with having staff, or does anybody want to have a little bit of time to think about it? Val?
My question is, could it be brought up at our meeting on Tuesday? Just rather than throwing something at them, just have it as a discussion item and then move on from there. That would make sense to me.
Yeah, we can. We have a meeting with the commissioners, and we have mentioned it to them in the past, but it's been probably at least a year. Okay, that was my item to talk about. If anybody else has anything? Val?
Yeah, I'm actually asking Jason. I knew that we had an open house for the Transportation Improvement Plan for 24-27 through I thought it was on the MRMPO website, and it was March and April. And I think I heard it was extended. Do you know anything about that?
I do not, but I can go look it up.
Okay, because I looked today on the website, the MRMPO website, and I didn't see anything about it that I was clear on. So I tried to look online before coming to ask, but if you could get back to me on that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Brian?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I have three things, but I'll make them quick. The first one is, can we get the water fountain fixed? Probably don't need to have a council meeting about that. But
I already put in a request ticket for that.
Thank you, Jason. Second, Jason, you had that meeting about the water treatment plan and the cost-cutting measures, and that information is super timely, given our public safety funding discussions, and I just want to know if maybe a memo would be more appropriate to get council the information as soon as possible, since we're actually having another public safety discussion this coming Monday, I believe. So maybe this is more a question for Sarah and Valerie and Aaron, but council really needs to get that information as soon as possible. So whatever the best way to do that is, I would request that that's done. Okay.
Yeah, I think we were waiting for a couple of things from the consultant on that, correct? Before we
it
were
came
able to
up,
get something
I
out.
believe Monday we had this discussion, and I think that we were hoping to get on the agenda as soon as we can, but it also was brought up that the agenda is very full. We can generate a memo, but there are, I think, items that council will want to weigh in on. So I believe that the memo will definitely lead to a workshop, but we can get it in a memo to you probably within less than 2 weeks.
Well, I'm just one counselor, but I would really appreciate that. I don't know if the rest of council wants that, but.
Memo?
Memo would be good, first to be over and then push it.
We'll start working on it.
Thank you. And then the third thing, I would just request that we put on our future agenda a discussion about creating, I don't know if this is the right term, but exclusionary zones in the parks. We've had a little bit of discussion about that, and I think that we're meeting with legal counsel here in 2 or 3 weeks, May 8th. And so if we can get that on our future agenda now, then we can hopefully have a meeting about that soon after we meet with legal counsel.
Valerie?
I was just going to say, and I think I talked to Aaron a little bit about this, is it would nice to have a list of things ahead of time to present to him of what we want to do, as opposed to waiting till afterwards. So I think it would be a wise idea to have some things that we say, specific things saying, we would like to do a child safety exclusionary zone. We would like to do this, this, and this, to bring up when he's here as opposed to waiting till afterwards.
I think Aaron has a list, because I'll give him some things.
Yeah, I've already been providing him a list of things, as council members ask me questions, I'm forwarding to them, so he'll be prepared to discuss some of those things. It may be a little premature to put that specific topic on as an item until you've heard from our attorney on that, but.
Yeah, fair enough. I just wanted to throw it out there. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, if you do have any specific ideas that you want to run past the attorney, we have that meeting scheduled on May 8th. So if you can get the ideas to Aaron Kubik in advance, he will pass it on to Aaron Heisel so that he'll be well prepared to talk to us that day. But if you think of something on the spot, it'll be okay too. Somebody else had something. Another hand? No? You have a fourth thing now? What? We haven't gone through.
Oh, I don't have a fourth thing.
Wait. Staff?
Our goal is to be done before Rick has to make a motion for 9 o'clock. As I pass this out, I'm going to have, JC is currently right now going to be sending you an email of what's on this document. This is the updated version for the budget gap that we're giving you, talking about Monday. This is your worksheet. So I'm going to turn it over to JC so he can talk to you a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is the hard copy. I did give you an electronic version that does some fancy calculations and such. But what you'll see is on the left side, or the columns are going to be your number, which is just a reference to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what row you're referencing. The next column is going to be the item or the budget reduction that staff started with, as well as some other programs and operational areas. There is a next column that is additional information, extra information as far as potential purposes or more clear descriptions of the potential budget reduction item. Then the next column is the staff recommended amounts that were reduced, and those are by department, obviously an item. And then the next column is the amount after the staff recommended. So after those removals, this is what the potential recommended budget would potentially look like if no changes were made. And then the next would be your changed amounts. So if you have a change that you would like to make, this is the column to put that information in. We do have some alternatives in the rows. So after every department, there's the suspected, not suspected, but there are the program and operational areas. So if you're going to want to move some dollars around, that is going to obviously affect the service levels in that department or that program area. And so the instructions again would be place a new amount that you would like to propose as a budget reductions. I did give some examples in the email. We would like to have this hopefully back by Monday by 9 a.m. so we can compile this and have this kind of ready for your viewing pleasure at the Monday's workshop.
Thank you. Questions?
What was that deadline there at the end?
Monday, 9 a.m. hopefully.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for putting that together. Anything else? Nothing else? 8 minutes? No? All right, Brian.
I move to adjourn.
Seconded by Val. All in favor of adjourning tonight?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will see you again on Monday.